So for those of you who are connected, though, you will actually be able to follow along with us because someone mentioned this last time. They would have loved if a level that we were going to be covering was shared prior or at the beginning of a stream. So we actually went ahead and shared out this level.
Woo!
So we're going to be covering UI today.
Cool. What's the title of the world? I'll put it in chat.
So yeah, the title of the world is called UI Movement Mechanics. Not movement is not with an N. UI Movement Mechanics. And so you can find that if you search on Project Spark right now. So you can download that and you can actually follow along with us as we go through this. So we are going to basically be going through all of, I shouldn't say all, but 4 kind of core.
Yeah, 4 is very different from all
stuff. And I'm just going to jump into it. And because this is a UI stream, we remove the banner that usually shows around. So just jumping into it, here are the 4 things we're going to cover. So we have a sliding mechanic. So sliding mechanic is basically, things slide left and right.
Actually, I'm doing this reverse. It would be like this.
Yeah, exactly. This is just basic sliding. Think of it as menu sliding in and out. Just any elements that can slide in and out.
That way.
Then we're going to be covering a point system, floating point system, where basically you get points and then they float up and they're added to the final. So you get like points that are added to the final as well. And you can see it updates it. I just have it it changed colors for a bit. You can make it more sexy. And then
fireworks.
And then we have an orbiting one where it's just basically it's UI orbiting around. A cool thing is I made it so you can change around the speed to make it super slow or super fast. And then you can also change around the radius. So you can make it larger or you can make it smaller. And I'm going to be talking about that and also showing the cool stuff you can do once you get orbiting down, what you can do with UI after that.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. Brian was kind of showing me all the extra things once you start actually going in and changing the code around a little bit. So it's going to be really cool when we get to that. Exactly.
And then last one is cursor. So I'm going to show how with a controller you make a cursor and you know this thing has a hover over state. So your cursor, how basically you can create hover over states with stuff. And then also show how to do that on keyboard mouse as well. So we're going to be covering controller. Keyboard mouse is a lot easier, so we'll cover that second.
Yeah, I believe it's one tile.
Yeah, it's one line.
Yeah.
I actually made it 2 lines just for consistency's sake. So here's the world, and we have our 4 different things and 4 different brains here. So before I get into this, I actually want to start out by giving just the basics of UI, because I want this to be a tutorial that if you're just a beginner in Project Spark or intermediate or advanced, you're all getting something out of this. So the basic idea is, let's take this and let's bring it over here. So why did I just delete that? I meant to go into the brain and delete a bunch of stuff. All right, so UI is sometimes people think of it as an unsexy thing. I think it can be a lot of fun. And the reason why they think it's unsexy is because it's lots of coding involved in getting your UI to look like how you want. Mm-hmm. Lots of doing specific exact numbering. And UI is based on, let's just go back to the test again. Oh, and I just realized it's fine. So you'll notice that we have, let's switch over to the cursor. All right, so you'll notice that we have up here, just ignore the fact that we have a bunch of overlapping things. But you'll notice I have text up here, a little box up here, text down here as well. And these are all set by setting X and Y coordinates. So on screen, think of this as if you've taken any graphing class in math. You have Y, which is just up and down, and that's the Y vector. And then you have X, which is left to right. And when you're working with UI, it's in a 2D environment, so you're using X and Y. Now, the very top of the screen up here, that is 1Y. Mm-hmm. Very bottom of the screen here, that is negative 1Y. The very right of the screen here, that is 1X. Very left of the screen here, that is negative 1X. So you go to for instance, the very top left corner here, and that is 1y, negative 1x. And so this is basically the boundaries of your on-screen elements. They have to be between 1 and negative 1 on both the x and y vectors.
Yep.
So let's show how to set vector positions. Exactly.
The cross.
Yeah, the cross.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two different main ways. There's a lot of different ways, but two main ways you can set vector positions. So the easiest one of them is, let's just make lots of lines here so you're not looking at that. Easiest way is you go here, and we have to our variables, we have vector variables. So let's call this graph point, because really with UI you're kind of choosing graph point, and that is going to be displayed on screen. So you have this vector variable, then you have graph point x, and now you set that to a number between 1 and negative 1. You can actually do outside of that and it will just appear off screen. So if you have a really large element, that's how you can get part of it off screen, part of it on screen. But let's say you want something that is right in the middle of the screen on the x variable. So let's say graph point x equals 0. Then you add graph point y. Let's say we want it a bit up, like halfway up. So graph point y equals 0.5, and that's like the halfway point between the center and up. And so then what you can do is you can use these two things we just set, and you can go here and choose to, let's display let's just display an acorn. At screen position, go to the vector variables, and then you will find graph point right there. And now you're displaying this acorn at that screen position. Let's jump in and test, and you should see that acorn is now right there, very large in the center, upper center of the screen. Another way you can set variables is by defining directions. So this is a combination of vector variables and directions. And what that looks like is right here. I have x equals east. So think of your graph has west and east is the x-plane. So this is, if you go to position, world relative direction, and you can choose, doesn't matter, either west or east. I just chose east. And then y is equal to world up, which you can also find in world relative direction.
Yeah. It is not north and south.
Right, north and south would actually be z, the z vector, and the z vector is 3D, UI is 2D, so you don't need north and south. So world up, because y goes up and down, so y would be world up or world down, whatever you want. And then since this is a duplicate, I can delete all this stuff. And then what you can do is, let's again display our acorn. And let's do display acorn at screen position. We are going to actually choose, I always forget where I can find 0. Is it in math, I think?
I think is it values vector?
Oh, you're right. You're totally right. Values vector 0. Bam. You can always type and search for it, but I want to find it. Okay, so display acorn at screen position 0. That is 0x, 0y, so this would be the very center of the screen. But then you can say plus, bring over x here, multiplied by, so let's have it, unlike last time we had x at 0, y at 0.5. So let's have x at 0.5 and y at 0.5. So what we do here is plus x multiplied by 0.5. And then we'd also add in plus y multiplied by 0.5. And the benefit of doing things this way is you're not setting a vector variable up here, and that's like a constant. You can basically set x and y, and those are just the two graph point variables you can use for everything you're showing on screen. So it equates to having to use less vector variables total. And then so we go into test, we'll see that this acorn is right there at the top right side. Don't worry about the thing in the middle. That thing is in the middle now because I deleted a bunch of stuff in order to simplify this. So we have the acorn there at the top right.
So by setting those two like vector variables, you're basically faking an axis, like right?
Yeah, exactly. This is faking an x-axis, and this is faking a y-axis.
Yep.
That's exactly what it's doing.
Yep. And then by using the multipliers like 0.5, like so those would by default be 1, 1. So that would be at the very top corner if you started and didn't do times 0.5 on each of those.
Exactly. And the other really useful thing is I for some reason I hate using negative numbers because I'm like, oh, why am I using a negative number? So the nice thing about doing things this way is I can also just say minus x multiplied by 0.5, and that brings it over on the left-hand side. So now we have the acorns on the left-hand side because it's
funny.
negative 0.5x. So
I prefer the negative numbers.
I
follow it easier than trying to.
Yeah, I see that, but for some reason for me, I just like negative numbers clutter up my number wheel. So I'm like, no, I want to use no negatives. So this allows me to use no negatives. All right, so all of that was just in preparation for us jumping into building the first thing, and the first thing we're going to be building is this sliding UI thing. So we're going to delete this thing we were working around with. All right, so sliding UI. So I actually start this out by using basically both of our concepts together. I define the x and y kind of graph points by setting x equal to east, y equal to world up. But I also have this slider variable for kind of the first point of my little item. I kind of like using, when you're having something dynamically moving, actually using x and y is a bit harder to manage than just having a vector variable. So I have this initial point, where this basic panel. Let's just copy all this stuff out. So here's all you really need to know about how this is. I set slider x is equal to negative 0.9, so that's very far on the left-hand side, and then y is equal to 0.8, so that's very high as well. So that would end up being very near the top right-hand corner, where it's displaying this basic panel. And you'll see, I go in, and indeed it is displaying it right at the top-hand corner. It's displaying that panel right there. So now what I want to do basically is on some sort of button press, I need to change this vector variable. That's the basics of making sliding stuff. And I need to change it on the x vector because I'm having things move in and out. Yeah. So it needs to move just on x and not on y.
And the whole element's moving with that position. So it'd be like the group, and it goes over and then goes.
So I want to use right trigger for this. You can obviously use anything. I'm using right trigger instead of usually I use D-pad to show and hide menu systems, but my D-pad just for this level itself is being used to switch between brains. So I want to use right trigger pressed, and I want to, when right trigger is pressed, I'm toggling on some sort of variable, and that variable is called slide UI. So I want to toggle on and off this sliding of the UI.
Got it.
So when the UI is sliding, so when basically slide UI is true, then I want to actually slide it. So how you slide it is do a duration timer of, let's say here it's 0.5 seconds, so half a second. During that half a second, then we use slider, its x vector, and we decrement that or decrease that by, let's say 0.025. I found that to be a really good, nice range of decreasing that variable. So for basically half a second, now the slider is x, decreases or lowers by 0.025 points per frame. Runs at 30 frames per second, so this lasts for 15 frames. So what that does is it's already 0.9, so then it'll go down to basically more than -1, so the thing will go off screen. So let's just let's ignore all of our old stuff down here. We are going to explain all of this, but let's ignore it all for now. And just so I can show you what this does. So right trigger is pressed, toggle slide UI. When slide UI happens for half a second, I slide it off the screen. Go in, hit it, and bam. So that's cool. It slid. But I need to slide it back now because it's sliding more and more off the screen every time I press it. So in order to do that, you want to also have when no longer slide UI. So when this thing is when I've toggled it to false, then I copy this right here. Or no, wait, sorry, not yet. Then I have this new variable I'm just going to call unslide UI. And that is equal to true. The reason I'm doing it this way is so that when I start the game, things aren't sliding as well. I want to go for just when no longer slide UI. Then this new variable called unslide UI becomes true. So under unslide UI, I just copy this duration timer slider x decrement by 0.025, and I just change that to increment because you want to increase it by the exact same amount that it decreased by, so it always goes back to the same exact place. And then after a countdown timer of half a second, then I also make unslide UI equals to false. And just like that, it's now sliding in and out. So there we go. There's the slider UI, just like that. Cool. Another quick thing I added onto this was I just had right here where I am displaying when slide UI is active, it says press RT to show, because when slide UI is active, that means the thing is off the screen. When it's inactive, it means it's on the screen. So then when it's on screen, I just have press RT to hide there. So it's just, you can also use those variables to kind of understand when the menu is hidden and when it's shown. So like, for instance, what you could do is when slide RT happens, you probably want your game to be paused. So you'd probably want to go and say world pace is equal to 0 right here, and put a started 2 under that. And then when slide UI is no longer happening, then you'd want to set a world pace is equal to 1. And then that, right by itself, pauses and unpauses your game. So I slide it, then you'll notice my game is now paused. I can't move my guy. He has no idle animation. But I slide it again, and then I can move him around again. So that's kind of how you can really quickly use that to pause and unpause your game. All right, moving on. All right, floating points UI. This is what a lot of people have been using, and it's really fun. It's just a fun way to, like, when you get points, have those points go from your person all the way up to this points display counter at the top. So we'll show how to do that. We have the same exact setup right here, where we are setting X and Y equal to east and world up. We have slider. It's the same variables using before. Slider is kind of just the variable for the thing that will be sliding around the screen wherever. And here, x is equal to 0, y is equal to negative 0.1. And I did it that way because I found out that I'm using follow camera, and with a follow camera, your player is at the center of the screen at all times. If I did y is equal to 0, the points would come from his head. So just by reducing it, looks like it's coming from his body. Looks a bit more natural. So you'll want to play around. You can actually even set y to be equal to like the placement of his enemies or so by using some ray casting. But that's a bit more complicated. We won't go into that.
Yeah, it's going to really depend like on the game that you're making, like where your character's at. I mean, it depends on the entire circumstance, right. but with some adjustment, like as long as your character is on a stable place generally on the screen, it would be able to work just fine. Yeah. You just have to figure out what position that would be in. Exactly.
And then the other thing I have here is I just have a total points that I set initially at 100. That's the display you saw at the top where it said 100 total points. So here, what you want to happen is basically every time something happens in your game that would award points, you have this Boolean become true. And so for me, I have this Boolean equals points added. And in this instance, I just have when right trigger is pressed, give points equals true. You would probably want to have it so like when I hit a creature, then give points equals true. So like I could do when attack hit, give points equals true. So you could kind of do whatever you want. But in this case, I'm just, for the simplicity of just showing it off, I'm just saying when right trigger is pressed, then this thing equals true. You'll just have to set it to whatever's happening in your game. So when give points happens, and let me, let's see, total points. Okay, that's all cool. All right, let me ignore out all of this stuff on the bottom here. And yeah, that should be good. Okay. So first thing I want to do when give points is equal to true, I want to start out by displaying a certain amount of points at my character. So like I just want to quickly set a random amount of points. So let's do points equals, you got a random number from, let's say 5 to 20 as integer. And this is just to make it so that I'm not giving myself the same amount of points. It looks a bit more fun.
This is the line that you'd go in and be like, oh, I defeated this enemy. I'd want it to be this,
Yeah, you'd probably want to be like points equals like damage to enemy, or like,
or even it would be like tied to the trigger event, so whatever triggers it would set what the points variable equals to before it runs through the Boolean, probably would be what would happen.
Yeah, exactly. So like you damage something and then points are equal to that damage, basically. But here I'm just setting it to a random number. All right, so another thing people don't really know is, some people know this, but not everybody, you can bold text and italicize text. And you can do that by using, this is basically CSS styling. So anyone here who knows anything about web programming, you'll know CSS is a very standard language you use for just stylizing stuff. And so this uses basically some CSS styling, but in HTML format. That's like probably above the minds of people who understand web programming, but that's basically what it looks like. And all you need to know is style, colon, bold. You put that within the two less than and greater than signs to close that, and that will allow you to make stuff bold. And then you just do style bold plus, and then do whatever text you want. So you want to do like, I like bananas. And then that would make the text, I like bananas, bold. And just for fun, we are going to have, instead of giving points, we're going to just have it give, I like bananas at this position.
You got to make it yellow at least then.
All right, I'll make it yellow. And so, all right, press RT to give points. So then I press RT, and you see I like bananas is right there in the center. So what I want to do now is I want that I like bananas thing to move up to where my total points equals 100 is. And so someone brought up in chat, you don't need the plus here. That is correct. I can remove this plus here. I like to put the plus there. It's just use either or. So you have to, with everything you're putting there, either use a plus for everything or use no pluses for everything. I like to use a plus because it just helps me segment all my stuff. So I know that it's showing this and other things all on the line. But if you do like this plus that and then also like the number 2, that will throw up errors for you. Because then you'll just need to do +2 and then bam.
I like to use plus. I think there's some situations where the syntax will get messed up depending on what you're trying to introduce in the line, and that does need a plus. So I just, for consistency's sake, I just put pluses for everything in my text lines.
Yeah, me too. All right, so now, I want this thing to move in a diagonal format up to my screen. So what I do is I have this similar to what I was doing before. As soon as give points is activated, then slider X, I decrement that by 0.025, and that'll do that every second. So I go in and test, and what that'll do is right now, it'll make it go this way. I add in Y onto that. So let's say...
I'm probably like super backwards.
Slider Y, I increment that because I want it to rise by 0.025. I actually found I want to do 0.03. So that rises a bit faster, and then that ends up going to kind of right up, bam, like right, right up there. So that was correct, but it didn't actually stop. It's not stop. It just is. Yeah, it just keeps on going. So you want to stop it, and how to do that is just simply you put a little indicator there for looking for when slider Y. So let's see, we're still all under this Boolean of give points. When started to slider Y is greater than 0.75, so that just looks for when that Y variable is greater than 0.75, then I have this new Boolean that I'm calling points added, and that just recognizes that I'm adding points to my score, so it allows me to do explosions, fireworks, other stuff, equals true. And then I'm incrementing my total points by the number of points I have. So even though we have it displaying I like bananas, we're still giving a certain amount of points here. And then give points, we're finally making that false. So this whole Boolean right here, we're finally, after all this stuff, making it false. What that looks like is we go up here, and I like bananas, and bam, 108, 125, 130. But you'll notice it's not, I like bananas thing isn't showing down at the center of the screen. It's starting back at the top of the screen. And that's because you need to reset the slider position back to this default right here. So what I simply do is, let's go all the way down here. I just look for when this Boolean is no longer happening. So when no longer give points, this Boolean is no longer happening, then I reset slider X equal to 0, I reset slider Y equal to 0, negative 0.1. And then that will reset to the position. So I go there, and it starts again, and we have I like bananas going all the way up to the very top every time. Just the nice thing, and you can, this points added Boolean is just a nice extra feature that I won't get into too much right here, but what I have is when points are added, I play the sound. You could, for instance, play an effect. So like, let's play some fireworks explosion because it's very happy. He has gotten bananas.
Or confetti burst even.
Yeah, like confetti burst. Then like we'll do that at position. I have this guy set as global player. And then I as soon as points are added for a tiny bit, it changes to red, so it indicates that things have been added. You can obviously change the size of it, do whatever you want. And then after 0.15 seconds, then points added equals false. And then you just have when points added isn't true, then this thing is displaying as yellow.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? We go here, and then we have fireworks or confetti. Confetti. More confetti. So you can use that for kind of whatever trigger event you want. You always want, when points are added, you want it to feel special to the player. It's kind of part of the psychological loop of getting them excited about getting points. If they just get points, it's somewhat exciting. If it's like an explosion of happiness and fun every time they get points, they're like, oh my god, I need more points. So, yeah.
We should have fireworks come out when you get more credits. Like, you got 50 credits?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to, actually, like, you think of the treasure trove in Project Spark, and, like, every time you get, like, it's not just you get that stuff, but when you unlock something, then it, like, comes out into this explosion of, like
that big
100
happy
credits,
face, right?
Times, like, two multiplier, 200 credits, happy face.
Boom, stars, gold. Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just, the more you do to make a person feel better about the points they're getting, then, like, the better they just feel about themselves. And that's kind of like, you guys are creating games along with whatever, what other creations you were making in Project Spark. So you will start to think about this kind of stuff, just like the game loop and the player loop. All right, let's move on to, we're looking pretty good on time. Yep. Orbiting UI. This is actually a very easy thing to accomplish if you remember sine and cosine. So this is, again, we'll just show, this is the circle kind of circling around you. And it's not fully circling around you because, so let's like bring this out. You'll notice when I kind of, when I increase the radius, So what I'm going to show you is not official, like fully circling. It's circling based on the size of the screen. When the screen size is y is 1 to -1, x is 1 to -1, but your actual screen size is in a 16 by 9 format or 1080p, then you're going to have a slight difference of sort of what a circle looks like, because on screen the circle is actually a rectangle. And I'll explain what I mean. But all right, so with the circling, we start at the exact same. We have the slider thing again. It's just kind of, I'm just thinking of it as like this slider vector variable is just the thing that slides around the screen. So we have x and y. We also have this slider x is equal to 0, slider y is equal to 0. It's really important you start from a 0 point because we will be using sine and cosine here. We then have a radius and radius increment that I'm going to get into. And then we have a division of sine and cosine, which allows you to set a radius here. So the very first thing you want to do is you are just simply displaying a whatever, like a button, at the screen position slider. Slider is screen position 0 and 0. All right, so let's just ignore all this stuff below here so we can kind of build it and you can see as it's happening. Let's, actually that stuff, yeah, I don't really have to worry about because, all right, cool. So it's like literally 3 lines to actually complete all this. So let's just like go back in here and, all right, we have this little thing in the center. Nothing's happening. We want this thing to start rotating. So people who remember trigonometry might remember some sine and cosine stuff. So the first thing you want to do is let's bring in, so slider x equals sine, let's remove this, sine radius. Radius is 0. So we'll just start at that. Go in here, do that, nothing happens. So we want to add in slider, was that y? Yeah. Now sine and cosine are like peanut butter and jelly of each other for making things rotate. So sine x equals sine radius, sine slider y equals cosine radius. Go in here, and it moved, but nothing happened. And that's because you have to, this radius thing, in order for sine and cosine to move, you have to have this, basically the radius increment. And that will allow it to start moving around in a circular format. So you just simply have the radius increment by whatever the radius increment is, and that is right here, 5. You have
and that's just a number you figure work the best for.
So that number, the radius increment is currently set to 5. Whatever that number is, the higher it is, the faster this thing moves.
Got it.
Lower it is, the slower this thing moves. So the increment is basically setting how fast something rotates. And so right now it's rotating based on the, what it's actually rotating on is kind of the outlines of the screen. Like if you think of it has, this thing has a radius right now of 1, and 1 is the edge of the screen. So this thing is kind of moving in a clockwise format, and it's always staying on the screen itself. So in order to bring down the radius, you actually want to divide this thing. And so that dividing this brings down the radius. So we just divide by right here. I have another thing, what I call the sine cosine divide. And this halves it. So I'm dividing it by 2, both these by 2. And there we go. KMK has the proper formula, the unsparkified formula, which is vector y equals radius by sine theta, and this is just the sparkified version of it. So I've divided it by 2, and that brings down the radius of this. All right, so that's all cool, and that is all I need to do there. So the reason I want to show all this is because, like, just once you get these things rotating, so, like, I just have this thing rotating, then you can really start to have fun. Just understanding how you can use trigonometry to make things dynamically move, and this is the easiest way of understanding it, is using sine and cosine to rotate in a circular format. Then you can start having fun with, you'll notice, basically, I set the radius increment, and sine cosine divide is they're all number variables, and so that allows me to, right here I can use left bumper to increase, and left bumper and right bumper to increase and decrease the radius increment, which is the speed. I can use left trigger and right trigger to increase and decrease the division of sine cosine, which increases, decreases the radius of the whole thing. But the fun stuff is when you start playing around with this. So, like, let's make slider x equals sine, slider y equals sine, and what that does is that kind of creates a slingshot effect, back and forth, like an easing slingshot effect. Mm-hmm. And that's like one cool thing you can do with that. You can also have fun by setting sine and tangent, and tangents are like, I guess I'll like show it with my finger, but it's like whoop, like that sort of. So it's and what it looks like on screen is it looks like something randomly kind of coming up from different points. And so you can use this to you can like set a random like radius of items, and it looks like things are just constantly coming up the screen and flowing up, and you get this like really cool, cool looking design right here. So like I'm increasing the radius right now, and you'll see the kind of curvature is a bit more pronounced here. Or I can decrease it, and you have like cool thing where it kind of like slows down as it's rounding the curve and speeds up again.
But isn't that called back from trigonometry, the amplitude of it?
Oh yeah,
amplitude or altitude? I think it's amplitude. Because it's like it's the repeating like wave, basically, right? Mm-hmm. Because it just goes through, and so I think it's the amplitude, which is the distance to the top.
I have to remind myself of like all the other
There's a whole bunch because there's like all this math that deals with sine, cosine, tangent. And that's trigonometry for you. So
yep. And then if you want to make it go counterclockwise, you just simply
amplitude or frequency, because frequency is how many times it actually, like how frequent the curve happens, and then amplitude is the height.
So if you just want to make it go counterclockwise, you just switch up basically which one is sine, which one is cosine, and then you have this thing now going counterclockwise. You can do the same thing right here by now you can have items randomly going down with tangent and sine kind of, or sorry, they're going across the screen instead of up to down. So you can just, it's once you get the basics of just setting sine waves and just rotational formulas like this, then you can just start having lots of fun by, like, this is how you get to what some people might have heard of, which are things like Bezier curves and much more complex uses of basically trigonometry in order to have things ease in and ease out, so that it looks a bit nicer than sliding in and out. And this is sort of your gateway into that. So this is something that I think is more approachable for a beginner, just to understand how something rotates. But then take this code, again, this level is shared, so take this code and just start experimenting with it and start using that to figure out, this is how I can kind of like ease something in and out by, like, if you remember, by setting both these to sine, then it is going diagonal, but it's easing, right? It's getting to the edge of the curves, and it's easing. And this is actually sort of like, you would understand it if this was in a 3D space more, because this thing is sort of like going around a circle, but the circle is like a flat line to you. So that's why it looks like it's just going up and down. And so that's, if you play around with that, then you can have something kind of easing in and out as well. So that's orbiting, and sort of the basics of how you get from there to having some fun.
Mm-hmm. If we get time, we should go back and try to put that into your sliding one. Slide in and slide out. That would be
I don't think
one.
we'll have enough time to
probably not.
to
we got 15 minutes.
But
that's something, if with the level at home, you guys can try to take that and incorporate it in with the first example of the slide in and slide out, and maybe put the ease in and ease out.
Yeah, and then it looks a bit better. I mean, if you play the game, the best example of this, I think, in Project Spark of UGC is X0, which uses so many Bezier curves and nice easing in and out of items. You'll notice that when they post the track times, everything kind of eases in, how the title X0 actually kind of slowly comes down and turns around for you. Mm-hmm. So that's a good way of understanding like how you can really use this to the full potential. All right, so cursor UI. I'm just going to add a little thing here. So like with cursor UI, you just have to make sure that you disable the whoever your character's brain is. So global player, brain is active equals false. When you're using a cursor, make sure you deactivate the player's brain. You want to deactivate inputs. And so let's just jump in here and show it. What we have is a cursor here, goes up, and then kind of has a hover state. We also have a mouse version, which you'll notice the cursor kind of moves away. So we have mouse version, we go up here, and then you have it toggling on and off when my mouse goes over it. So, in order to do that, this is actually something that Thomas and I had to figure out when we were playing around with
the Conquer multiplayer arena.
Yeah, the Conquer multiplayer arena. All right, so we won't worry about this for now, or any of that stuff. But I am going to comment out some things. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up here, and I won't worry about using controller. Because we're first going to start on controller, which is a bit harder, and then we're going to be showing how to do this on keyboard and mouse. All right, so all this stuff, let's comment out. Bam, you're gone, you're gone. And that stuff, well, no, I'll comment this stuff out. I won't comment out, this is just displaying move the cursor into the box at the top of the screen. You guys don't have to worry about how I did that. Okay, so like all the others, we are setting X and Y. We're also setting slider X equal to 0, slider Y equal to 0, and then we're starting this cursor. I'm using the coding crosshair at screen position slider, which is the very center of the screen. And I brought down its scale also. It's a pretty big thing, so I brought down its scale to 0.5. Oh, yeah, someone brought up a really good point about using like a sine cosine or the Bezier curves is really fun with world water, because then the world water kind of eases up and down. It looks really cool.
Good rising tide.
Yeah, it looks like waves coming in. All right, so this is actually pretty simple stuff. We simply do slider X increment by I'm going to be using my left stick to move around. So increment by left stick X. I won't put any modifiers on because I want to show how funky it looks before I put any other modifiers on. Slider Y increment by left stick Y. So let's see with just those things in action. And I just want to make sure all of this is commented out. Yeah, cool. All right. So, move this around and whoa! It's just like jumped off the screen quickly. And that's because your left stick and your right stick, their X and Y increments are not based on the X and Y increments of your on-screen UI. It moves very fast. So what I actually, we found when we were experimenting on getting Conquer's multiplayer arena right, there's like a part where you begin where you're selecting your character, and we had to have cursors selecting characters there. Is do slider X increment by left stick X multiplied by 0.03.
It's extremely low.
Yeah. So now I want to address one thing some more senior people might be wondering, why don't I look at mouse position? Even though I'm using controller, why don't I look at mouse position? And that's because if you are working in a multiplayer game, mouse position is not a thing anymore.
Yep.
So if you're making a game for multiple people, a mouse position is an irrelevant thing. Everyone's using controller. So we recommend using this for controller is slider X, increment by left stick X, multiply by 0.03. That makes it a bit slower. And then slider Y, increment by left stick Y, multiply by 0.03. Let's jump in again. Now let's move this thing. Moves a lot more naturally. Now you can play around with basically the modifier. The more you bring it up, the faster this cursor moves around. And the more you bring it down, the slower the cursor moves around. You're going to have to find a nice balance, though, of there is a slight minuscule delay. The faster this thing moves around, the more of a delay you'll see in like when you move your stick and when this thing moves.
Yep. So it wasn't that big of a deal for selecting a character at the beginning of the game.
Exactly.
But if you're trying to do some fast-paced thing and it's like a Twitch thing, and you definitely will notice it. So it just depends on that modifier.
Yeah, so that's how you can move around your cursor, your selector. Like you just have this show it slider, and then you have your slider increment by left stick X, left stick Y. Bam, you get your cursor. Now, how do we do that hover over state? So the hover over state, so we have this box up here, and we have, I commented that. Okay, cool. So this is kind of, this requires planning. So what you need to be able to do is just understand what the limitations are of this, what the bounding area is of this little box here on both the X and the Y vectors. So I've already written that down, so I kind of thankfully know it, but let's take this. Okay, so let's just copy this because I already kind of took this down. All right, so what I found the kind of bounding areas to be is that little box there. It was the kind of the width of it was between 0.67 on the screen and 0.83 on the screen. That was the width of it. So those 2 points equals the width. So I wanted to look for when slider, which is that, when its X position is greater than 0.67 and it's less than 0.83. So it's basically within those 2 points. So it's within that length or that width. Then we also want to make sure that it's within the height. So when slider, I found that basically the height was between 0.63 on the Y vector, 0.9 on the Y vector, creates the 2 points right there. So then I look for when slider Y is greater than 0.63 and it's less than 0.9. So when both of those are accurate, then this variable in box is equal to true because it is in the box.
Yeah, I mean, you basically defined a box by going doon, 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 and you have this nice little area that it would be valid.
So mouse, all right, let me again get to people asking about why don't we use mouse position here. Mouse position will work with a controller on Xbox, on PC, until you try to make a game with more than one person, then it just doesn't work whatsoever. So this is a way to basically, this works consistently for every controller. So in situations where you're making a multiplayer game, use this code. Don't try and use, there's ways you can use mouse position, which we won't get into in this tutorial, but use this way in order to make it work. Okay, so we have basically, once it's within that X width and within that Y height, in box equals true. I want to look at also when it's not within that height, then in box equals false. Also, when it is not within that width, in box equals false as well. So you want to actually have this in both areas, or else it'll think like, well, I'm not within the width, but I'm still within the height, and you can be like all the way like over there. So like this just makes it so that it's fine. And then I can delete all this stuff. And then I just simply have right here when inbox, so when this is equal to true, then I display the blank tile at screen position, the same screen position as at. And when it is else or equal to false, I display it with an opacity of 0.5. So right now, you guys have been seeing it with an opacity of 0.5. But now when it's inbox, it will be completely no longer see-through. And I have my cursor behind it. Because the very last thing that I wanted to get into is just understanding how code reads priorities of items displaying on screen. So code reads things sequentially, and it adds based on once it's read something. So we're going through this brain right here. Very first thing it says it's looking to put on screen. All right, I'm putting this crosshair on screen first. And then, all right, now I'm putting this blank tile on screen. So I'm stacking them. But what that means is the crosshair has been put first. The blank tile thing has been put second. So that will be above the crosshair. The crosshair will always be underneath it. Or I guess you guys will look at it this way. So if you just want your crosshair to appear above the blank tile, then just bring it a line below the blank tile. You can also use, there are modifiers for priority, but I find every time I've used priority, where is it?
It's right there.
Oh yeah, every time I use priority, I always get confused. And I'm like, oh man, did I set this at like 0.1 and 0.2?
I prefer just to use the ordering.
Yeah, and it's just much easier to use the ordering of like, okay, this appears first, and that appears second, and that appears third. So using that ordering, and now I go into test, and my little cursor thing appears above this. So that's how I've quickly set the priority. Alrighty, so now the second one is I want to show how to do this all with a mouse, because this code will not work at all with a mouse keyboard. Mouse does not understand what left stick is. A mouse is not using sticks. So did I comment that stuff out? Yeah, I did. Cool. Alrighty, so the first thing I want to do is I want to only display this crosshair when I'm using a controller. So I go to input methods and is using controller because I want to use the default mouse. I could technically use something else with a default mouse, but then it'd appear right above the mouse and it would look weird. So I want to use the default mouse. Then I want this to only happen if I'm using a controller. So these are under is using controller, and then what I want to put under is using keyboard mouse. Two really simple lines. So mouse position is pretty nice because all you want to do is slider X is equal to go to mouse position X, and slider Y is equal to mouse position Y. Go into test, and now, so we have the thing disappear and we have my mouse go up here, and it's still working properly. And just like that, I have this slider position is the same as my mouse position, so it understands when it's over the screen. And you can even make it simpler. You can actually just simply say slider
equals mouse position.
Yeah. Equals mouse position. Bam. And look at that. So just slider equals mouse position. I just wanted to show X and Y first so you understand it's work on the same variable. But UI doesn't count Z, so Z is like a fart in the wind. So there you go. That is how you do a cursor. And with that, I believe I've hit on everything.
Yeah. One thing like you can do, because it's kind of a pain, right? If you have a ton of UI elements and you have to bound like each of the boxes and do all that, one thing you can do is if your UI elements are relatively like the same, so like, you know, you have a bunch of like circular buttons to choose from or square ones, you'd actually be able to like define like your, you know, basically your slider when it is like closest to that vector position or whatever, rather than like define it, right? You could just say like when you're within, your x is whatever is within 2, of that, you basically could define like a radius or what have you, but it wouldn't always have to be a box.
That's true. Yeah. When you're working with circular items, then it does get a bit trickier. One thing I also just realized I forgot to cover, which is super important, is let's go all the way down here. Let's comment out these 2 lines, and let's use the cursor again. So I got my cursor, and oh no, I went off screen.
Oh, that's right, yeah. That's
so a really important thing is when you're working with cursors, you want to make sure your cursor can't go off screen. Now, with mouse position, that's not something you have to worry about because your mouse position can't go off screen, so the cursor can't go off screen. But if you're using your left stick, then the cursor can totally go off screen. So in order to just keep that from happening, you want to use clamps. And the structure of a clamp, I have it right here, but it's a very long line, so I'm going to go through it again. So the structure of a clamp is you want to say the thing you're clamping first. So I'm clamping the x vector of this vector variable called slider. So you want to set that thing you're clamping. And then it equals, you want to then say, you go here to math, you go to functions, choose clamp, and then you say what you want to clamp it to. And clamping basically makes it so like you can't go above or below a certain number. That's just the maximum and minimum. So I want to set a minimum of 0.1, which is the very bottom of the screen, or I guess here, because we're using x, it's very left of the screen, and then a maximum of 1, and that's the very right of the screen. Then you have to say, again, what it's clamping. So like this slider x equals a clamp, a minimum 1, a maximum of 1, but then this is looking for, all right, it's a clamp of 1 and -1 of what variable again, or of what thing again, and so then you have to say it's a clamp of this, slider x. So slider x equals a clamp of itself, basically. And you do the same thing for y. So slider y equals a clamp minimum, -1, max 1 of slider y. And then that right there clamps it so that you go to the very top, and let's turn on my cursor. You go to the very top, and then you can't go further than that. Go to the very right. You can't go further than that. And this clamps it. Keeps from moving. Clamping. Use that. Don't try and use when like you can only move the stick when x is below 1, because then if you go to the center of the screen, your cursor will get stuck because it's at 1. So it's like, oh, I can't move anymore. So that is it. Those are 4 what hopefully should be kind of fun UI elements, just things to help kind of, you can have a lot of fun with UI. And these are the basic building blocks. Again, this is shared already. The one thing it's not included in the shared thing is I showed on this stream how to set a cursor for a mouse position. That's not actually in the shared world, but you can find the world right now. It's called UI Movement Mechanics, and it's by Invisible Doogie, which is my personal account because I was working on this over the weekend to just try and get it as clean as possible.
Create your game as you play? Any Spark can do it. Spark, activate the portals.